Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to the second webinar in our summer series. It's a real pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Paul Crawford, whose pioneering work at intersection of health and the humanities has championed the role of creativity in academic and clinical practice. I'm truly impressed by Professor Crawford's magnificent contributions, which have profoundly shaped the fields of health, humanities, and creative practice, inspiring scholars and practitioners alike to reimagine the role of the arts in well-being and academic life. Professor Paul Crawford is the founder and first professor of the global interdisciplinary field of health humanities. He developed and directs the Center for Social Futures and the Institute for Mental Health, the University of Nottingham, UK, and pioneered the Health Language Research Group in 2001 to advance interdisciplinary multimodal health discourse analysis. He has contributed to policy development in the UK, advising senior politicians on the importance of social and cultural assets to advancing healthcare, health and well-being. He consults on public mental health, healthcare environments, health communication, and has spearheaded the notion of creative public health, democratizing arts and humanities knowledge and practices to advance health and well-being. Professor Crawford's work has attracted multiple awards and recognition, not least fellowships of the Royal Society of Arts, Academy of Social Sciences, and Royal Society for Public Health. His pioneering work in health humanities has attracted over £7 million research funding from Arts and Humanities and Research Council, Economics and Social Research Council, ESRC, MRC, Cross Council UKRI, the Leverhulme Trust, and British Academy. He has led numerous AHRC-funded research networks related to the arts and dementia, the representation of mental state in literature, and in the broader health humanities. His innovative approach to health communication education achieved a Lord Deering Award in 2008. Professor Crawford recently led two major projects funded by AHRC, a £1 million production, an evaluation of original animation with Academy Award-winning Artman to advance mental health literacy among young people. This campaign won Best Design and Content in the 2021 Design Week Awards, multi-categories in the 2021 PR Week Pride Awards, and Best Public Engagement Initiative in 2024 Institute for Policy and Engagement Awards. It reached over 17 million people within 4 months of launch alone. The scientific research from the project showed increased mental health literacy among young people from viewing the film. £800,000 study of Florence Nightingale that focused on domestic health, psychological health, and contagion. The book from this study, Florence Nightingale at Home, with Palgrave Macmillan, won Best Achievement in the People's Book Prize in 2021 and was long-listed for the 2020 B.S. Hughes Award for science-related writing. Professor Crawford was co-investigator for the AHRC-funded £1.25 million national MARCH network into social and cultural assets for mental health. He is currently co-investigator for both a new ESRC-funded £700,000 investigation, Influencer Narratives and Mental Health. He has been consultant researcher for the new disabilities-related feature film Astronaut with award-winning filmmaker Chai Tai, winner of the Narrative Grand Jury Award, and Lockdown Landscapes, a creative display on the pandemic to support the public at the National Memorial Arboretum, the UK's year-round place to remember. Professor Crawford has held multiple visiting professorships or advisory board appointments in the UK and overseas. He has written over 200 publications, including peer-reviewed papers, book chapters, short papers, or commentaries, and 16 books. His most recent non-fiction books include Mental Health Literacy and Young People, Cabin Fever, Surviving Lockdown in the Coronavirus Pandemic, Florence Nightingale at Home, the Routledge Companion to Health, Humanities, and Humanities, Mental Health and Public Shame. He's joint editor-in-chief for the Palgrave Encyclopedia of Health Humanities and commissioning editor for two book series, Routledge Studies in Literature, Health, Humanities, and Arts for Health, which provides the public with key information on how different creative practices or engagement can support health and well-being. His book, Health Humanities with Palgrave, is now available in Mandarin. His other books are Madness in Post-1945 British American Fiction, Evidence-Based Health Communication, Communication in Critical Settings, and and communication, sorry, evidence-based research, highly recommended by British Medical Association Book Awards 2002, and Politics and History in William Golding, The World Turned Upside Down. His first novel, Nothing Purple, Nothing Black, in 2002, achieved critical acclaim with fellow writers David Lodge, Roy Porter, Sarah Maitland, and Paul Sayer. The novel was also optioned for film with award-winning filmmaker Jack Emery. The Drama House. Professor Crawford's second novel, The Wonders of Dr. Bent, was published in March 2025 to the acclaim of global leaders in mental health. So thank you for joining us, Professor Crawford, and now I will hand over to you.
Thank you. Wow. Sometimes when you get sort of bio introductions, it can feel a bit like an obituary. But you read that so beautifully. Thank you so much. And I'm a little bit jet lagged because I've just come back from a tour of China and Taiwan. Actually, I think this morning, but I can't be sure. So, thank you for that summary and welcome everybody. I will basically go through some of the elements that we've got the theme creative academic about my life really, because the life I've had has been a strange mix, very interdisciplinary. Just for background, I did literature and language studies, went on to do a PhD on William Golding. I'm a creative writer, as you've heard, and also write history. Um, and my main sort of clinical focus in my life has been mental health. So I'm really interested in how a creative life plays out, both in terms of university work, but also in terms of, personal hopes and desires for writing books and for writing books about books. So I'll take you through a few slides. And Arya, thank you for flagging up some of the projects. I can't really talk about all of the projects today in much detail, but I'd like to cohere this webinar around creativity and storytelling, if I may. So just flag up the funding which has been mentioned, which I'm supposed to do whenever I do talks about the research I do. And I kindly mentioned my work in sort of spearheading health humanities, which is what I've been talking about over in China and Taiwan. And those are just some of the key sort of texts that have been out recently, which you can check up on. So health humanities is about all the arts and humanities and how they impact on health and well-being. And it's kind of a bigger arc to it than traditional medical humanities, more inclusive, more applied, and not necessarily led in a medicalizing way. So in terms of storytelling and narratives, there's plenty in that body of work, which is around the world now, which looks at literature, representation, how we tell stories, and so on, which is going to be the main focus of this webinar. So why storytelling and where did that start for me? I was actually 11 years old and I went to J.R.R. Tolkien's school in Birmingham in the United Kingdom. And on the first day, as a new boy, they slapped this particular edition of The Hobbit on my desk. And I picked it up, went away, read it, and realized that you can create hallucinations in other people's minds through words. You can create the scaffolding for people's imaginations. You can send people on their own particular journey through the words you put on the page. And I was hooked from that moment on and didn't stop really. So my whole creative life started then, I believe, in terms of the power of stories and narratives to shape who we are, to entertain, to inform, and actually more deeply as a kind of social action. So my work in stories isn't simply academic. My work in stories is ethical. It's deeply laced with making a difference in the world, changing other people's stories for the better, and avoiding destroying people's lives through the stories that we share and tell of each other. I won't go into all the detail of that ethical work, but you can read some of my publications, which are really rooted in the whole business of stories being serious business. So some of the early work, these are just flagging up some of the early books, but there were also many papers. Back in the 1990s, late 1990s, I did the first book on nursing language because I was a little bit tired of most of the language work, applied language work, being on doctor-patient interactions. And I saw that nurses actually were having more of the communications across the whole. So that book kind of delves into the ethics of narratives, how stories can change people's lives, and how they can also entrap people and make their lives difficult. And going on a little bit further into the early 2000s, I looked at with Rhiannon and my colleague, Professor Brown, the whole business of using short stories, small stories, sorry, in cognitive behavioral therapy, and went on with colleagues, including the now past Ronald Carter, the great spoken language expert. We did a book on the evidence base for health communication, which had a lot in it about narratives. But more recently, I've been very excited to lead this major project with Aardman, the makers of Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep, etc. There was a lot of interest last week out in China about this because they use a lot of immersive approaches in animation and are very keen, of course, on Aardman, as pretty much everybody in the world is, I think. So I was invited by Aardman to put together a team and a grant application to the Arts Humanities Research Council to create new animations to support young people's mental health, and particularly their mental health literacy, their kind of early conversations, understandings in transition to adulthood about life's challenges. And as you can see from these five characters that were co-designed with 42 young people, we have the great animator Dan Binns working on this, who did a lot of the work on Shaun the Sheep, and he's director of animation at Aardman Studios in Bristol. The young people told us that these were the five things that most kind of challenged them in their lives in this transition period. Perhaps no surprise to people there to see those. But when we did this work and it came out in the pandemic, our animation on loneliness was particularly poignant for obvious reasons in terms of the lockdowns that went on. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. You can go on YouTube, Aardman's YouTube, to see these short animations, and also on www.whatsupwitheveryone.com for our website as well. We reached a lot of people and we stopped counting after the 4 months, or basically Aardman, they don't continue counting after this. It's just pointless. We basically reached as many as we needed to reach in the media. And we tested the animations and found that they did actually improve young people's mental health literacy, understanding about mental health, confidence in helping others, reducing stigma, and increasing their willingness to help, as well as their knowledge and attitudes about it. So stories work, animated stories work. That's what this research really showed. And it's important for health messages, not simply from adult world to young people, but young people's messages to other young people about their health and how to start conversations about that. And we got great social media feedback from young people about the resources and their value to them. Very happy with that. Didn't win the Oscar. That's me probably salivating in Aardman's executive office with one of our meetings and seeing all the awards around the studios made us very, very keen. But we did, as Aya kindly mentioned, we did win a slew of awards, including Design Week awards. So we were very happy that this work was recognised. So moving on a little bit, I've always been interested in film, particularly in fiction and stories and how and when they get to film. And I kindly followed the Aardman project with, well, I didn't follow it really. I was invited by Chi Tai, who is a fabulous filmmaker, as many of you, I hope, will know and come to know, particularly the recent film Raging Grace, but there are many others that she's won awards for. Particularly interesting with Chi is this kind of dimension of looking at how health is represented, how we represent health in creative industries. And for me, how film and literature are part of any nation's health. They are resources there. They can reach parts of societies that other health-related, perhaps, initiatives don't always do. So this is serious business. This isn't simply entertaining around topics of healthcare. It's a real contribution from creative industries to the health of nations. So Chi got in touch and she invited me actually to be the researcher on a new film, which hopefully goes into production for next year, I believe. And this is around a condition called spinal muscular atrophy, which is particularly challenging and difficult, both psychologically and physically. So I did the research Bible for this new feature film, which is called Astronaut. And it's going to be kind of a part, I guess, a dark comedy. I can't say too much about it, but it's going to be pretty irreverent and also break some of the old hat perspectives on disability. Put it that way. And I won't say any more. We'll have to see what happens with that one. Following on from that recent work with What's Up with Everyone, with Aardman, with working with Chi Tai, I'm really happy to have been on the team here from Birmingham University looking at mental health narratives in social media. So natural follow on from What's Up with Everyone, really, looking at how narratives are created by influencers, professional ones, well-being ones who may be just self-situating as well-being people, and people with lived experience. So there's a first paper out, which if you email me at paul.crawford@nottingham.ac.uk, I can fill you in on anything you're interested in from this webinar today. Um, but our first paper came out a few weeks ago, actually, and there is more later in the year. So do get in touch. So how does that relate to some of the kind of series I'm doing, and why should we be interested in such series? Well, the Arts for Health series actually started curiously and creatively on the back of walking out of a meeting with Ardman in Bristol. And I was just up to get a flat white and recover a little bit from all the excitement. Um, and it dawned on me that where are the books out there for the public? Never mind academics. Where are the books out there for the public to self-inform about the possibilities of different arts and humanities improving and advancing their lives? And I was a little shocked when I had this thought that I hadn't seen anything out there. Okay, I guess there may be stuff out there, but I hadn't seen anything. So I quickly got on the phone and called one of the commissioning editors, and at Emerald, they immediately got excited about the possibility of short volumes that go into the history and the evidence base for different art forms impacting on human health and well-being, and case studies and helps and guides how to be involved and so on. And we're now at 16 published volumes with four more in the pipeline and 30 in total coming out. And as you can see, from these alone, and not just focus on the wonderful storytelling book by Mike Wilson, but if you look at reading, film, video, history, painting, of course, theatre, and so on, you will see that that kind of almost substrate of stories is key to so many of our creative enterprises. Where would we be without stories in games, for example? That massive area now of creative industry, which is shaping our world. So this series, I'm delighted to say, is out there and is now being considered for placement as a whole series in bookshops. So physically placed in Waterstones and all the bookshops. So very excited about that. Haven't quite finished that series. As soon as I get over my jet lag, I'll have to see what's coming up next. So, as I said, I wanted to mention a little bit about all the different work, creative work I've been involved in academia, or some of it anyway. I guess some of the keynotes of that work have also been history and history writing. I love history. I love reading it. I also love writing it. And his two books that were actually written mostly during the pandemic. So the first one was with my oldest son, Jamie, who's a leading data analyst, and I can't say it, a data analyst. He's vice president of Wavo in Montreal. And I actually struggled with the whole business of lockdown, like so many people did during the pandemic. And I said to him, have you actually read a history of cabin fever? You know, that kind of um, I guess you call it a folk syndrome, really, rather than a medicalized syndrome of irritation, difficult mental health, um, aggressiveness, etc. Um, that comes with being confined or in isolation for long periods. And he did a quick check for me, and we identified no, that wasn't the case. There wasn't a history. So we quickly started working on a history of cabin fever, and that was partly my experience of lockdown was being creative and co-writing a book with my son on its history. Most people think it's from cabins on ships, and that is relatable. But in fact, as you'll read in the book, it all started in 19th century Ireland. And I'll say no more on that. But if you're interested in that topic and you're interested in, what the mental health impacts of lockdown uh, were and have been historically, and if you're wondering, did you actually have an experience like you might if you were training to go to Mars during your lockdown? Yes. Yep, it was the greatest confinement in human history, and it was the non-NASA funded global research event. And one would imagine that Elon Musk benefited greatly from all the knowledge about the psychological impacts of long duration spaceflight that occurred during the pandemic. And maybe some people are hoping that Elon Musk is the first to go to Mars and possibly stay there. I don't know. I won't make any political comments. But another history that I've been involved with, as I say, I've had great teams. I'm a team player as well as a sole writer. And being creative for me is actually writing on your own and writing together and making good choices about that. What a great choice it was to work with colleagues in literature and in history, rewriting really a history of Nightingale, revisiting a history of Nightingale, and winning the People's Book Prize with this. I'm proud about the achievements here, which was to try to make Nightingale more relatable, more 3D, more human, and less, I guess, stiff and stern. If you look at the histories of Nightingale previously, by focusing on the concept of home, the material reality of her homes and her experience in homes, and also her work. And what many people don't realize is that although she's often remembered in the stories about her, she's often remembered as this kind of heroic, saintly figure who turned up in the Crimean War in the mid 19th century and helped soldiers to survive after being wounded. Yeah, that's a big part of her life. That's what she's often known for. But in fact, most of her work came after that when she returned to England, and she returned with a kind of long COVID syndrome for her period. She was infected by brucellosis when she was out in Turkey, and she developed a syndrome not unlike long COVID, with chronic pain and fatigue. And here's one for all the vice chancellors out there. She spent most of the rest of her life, her long life actually, housebound and working from home. And she changed the world of public health from her pillow. So, in terms of statistics, representations of mortality, in terms of hospital design, driving nursing forward from its female workforce base across history into closer to what we might think of as a profession, um, sanitation reforms, etc., etc., all from largely her bed or her chaise longue. So that's my excuse when people say, "Oh, you're working from home." Yeah, I'm following Florence Nightingale's example, one of the greatest public health innovators in the world, um, and so on. But she didn't come through unscathed, I have to say, and that actually folds back into the history of cabin fever. Nightingale suffered with depression, and I think in large part from being confined within four walls for long periods. She actually herself suffered cabin fever. So again, those are aspects of the history of Nightingale which are are fresh, I think. So what about fiction then, more squarely? I've always seen fiction rather as David Lodge, who's now sadly passed on as well. David Lodge, the literary critic and novelist. Um, I follow really his view that fiction is the greatest sort of repository of human consciousness. I mean, when you read fiction, you enter into all these different possible consciousnesses and uh, mental activities and uh, vistas of um, events and happenings and impacts and so on. And I think this has certainly been the case for me in my life that, I've been an avid fiction reader and also um, a writer. I've only uh, had two novels out, but I've had five literary agents in my lifetime of writing. And I might say a little bit more about that towards the end, if I may, in terms of where I am with that, what I've been doing with that, and why. But before I do so, there's also the business of, literary criticism. As David Lodge kind of straddled literary criticism and fiction, that's also been a feature of my creative academic life. So my PhD was on the work of William Golding, Lord of the Flies, etc. Most people only recall Lord of the Flies, or maybe one of his later works like Rites of Passage. In fact, if you want to read an amazing book, I would say read his second novel, The Inheritors. If you've not read that, make the effort, have a read. Um, so the literary criticism there that I did was also connected really to mental health because I was interested in consciousness. I was interested in how William Golding actually represented people's minds and the challenges to their minds, and that plays a large part in his um, his body of work. Um, Later, I had a Lever Hume Award and appointed Charlie Baker as the research fellow on that project, and we examined how we framed it madness with caveats about the use of that term uh, ethically, but how aberrant mental state or mental state which is deemed to be non-normal is represented in fiction. We focused on post-1945 British and American fiction, and that was the literary criticism that came out at that time. So I'm interested in further pursuing literary criticism. As yet, I that hasn't re-emerged directly in my life, I would say, but I am open to that. More importantly, from a point of view of my academic colleagues around the world, I've been delighted to be the editor for this series, the Routledge Studies in Literature and Health Humanities. I can't remember where we are now on the numbers of volumes, but it's quite a large number now. And there's been fabulous stuff coming through here in terms of the way different kinds of narratives are playing out around the world in terms of their resonance with aspects of health, disability, the psychological side, but also the physical side of this, and more to come. I'm pleased to say. I had a couple of offers when I was in China last week and the week before in terms of Chinese literature and the matter of health. So if you're interested in that, you know where I am. I'm easy to find these days, so do drop me an email if you have an interest in this area. So this is my second novel, The Wonders of Dr. Bent. I think it's my fourth or fifth in my lifetime, but I had a wonderful second agent who's sadly passed, Vernon Conway. He was an agent for the West End stars as well as for writers, including the horror writer Clive Barker. Some of you may remember Vernon actually started the career of Clive Barker. Um, and he gave me a couple of pieces of fabulous advice. He'd escaped crystal meth during the in Berlin as a child, escaped to America, and then worked with young people and went on to be a literary agent. And he gave me some very hard-won advice about the whole business of being a creative person. First of all, don't even think about the money side of it. That is really, really tenuous for a start. And the second thing he said to me was um, only submit for publication um, fiction that you truly believe you won't regret and you truly believe is important and of a high, the highest quality that you feel that you can do. And I've taken him seriously on that. I don't write donuts. I don't write donuts. The world of writing now has been moved into productivity, a novel a year or two a year, and all the stuff that goes with that. I just can't bear that. If I was writing for money, I wouldn't be a writer, basically. That's how I view it. So I write literary fiction, and I'm a small player, I guess. I've written two. There you go. Um, but the first one had the option for film with Jack Emery. Um, Jack Emery married Joan Bakewell, for those not in the know about Jack, and worked with greats like Derek Jacobi and McCallan and so on. And we had the film lined up for Nothing Purple, Nothing Black, which was my first fiction back in 2002. So quite a long time ago, hence all the grey hair. Um, and I got very excited because I saw Timothy Spall mixing it up with Ian McKellen and so on. Um, and then Jack, unfortunately, got a very bad cancer and was headed out to the Mayo Clinic in America. And thankfully, he recovered and he's still with us today. So job done. But unfortunately, Jack's production company, the Drama House, folded during that long battle to stay alive. So unfortunately, my film did not come out. How galling is that? Your first novel turned into film, didn't happen. So what did I do? I tucked into academic life more purposefully in terms of non-fiction and all the work there, and spent most of the rest of my time writing non-fiction and leading research grants. But about 4 years ago, I decided actually it's time to come back to fiction and to get back into writing creatively myself again. And this is the net result. It's the story of a goth psychiatrist, a leading goth psychiatrist, who tries to humanize a high security hospital to make it more humane and less prison-like. And a bit of a campus feel in there because one of the antagonists, Jason Hemp, is I guess, a middling English lecturer who sets out to find the killer of his twin brother. And his world comes into the world of the incredible Dr. Bent. Um, and the wonders, that title, the wonders, comes from what the staff at the high security hospital referred to in terms of the reforms and changes that Dr. Bent made or attempted to institute to make the institution more humane. They called it His Wonders. So that's the title. One of the journalists who interviewed me recently said that they definitely saw it like a Netflix here, uh, perhaps shortening the title from The Wonders of Dr. Bent to Dr. Bent or simply Bent. So we'll see about that if they're listening. Um, I'm on radio BBC on again on Sunday on Radio Bristol, I think at when is it? Probably 3:15 or something on BBC Radio Bristol. If people are listening on Sunday to talk about the wonders of Dr. Bent. Um, and yeah, so I don't quite know where everything's going to go creatively in terms of my academic life and my creative writing life. Um, but isn't that fantastic? I mean, that's worth getting out of bed for. I do have a another novel in mind, which would follow on from this one, but I haven't written that out yet. Um, but in terms of creativity, as I say, I won't be creating a donut anytime soon. I'll be taking my time, and I hope whoever reads and great reviews of the book so far, but I hope new readers actually enjoy the kind of appropriation of some genres uh, within this literary fiction rather than the other way around. You're actually kind of writing to genre, which is rather different. So I'll stop there, I think, Arya. Um, and I'll leave my contact there, my author website, paulcrawfordauthor.com. If you're interested, you can see all sort of the book publications, fiction and non-fiction I've been up to. My email there for any follow-up questions about some of the academic projects. I have no idea really what I might be doing next year, frankly, in terms of academic life, in terms of what I'll be writing, what I'll be submitting grants for, or when I'll get back onto fiction again. I'm currently writing a short history, and that's in the pipeline. So yeah, I hope some of the ideas and some of the, if you will, colour of the work to date, I hope it makes you feel there's plenty to do, plenty of different things to do, interdisciplinary things to do, um, and maybe I hope impels you to find the right people in the wrong rooms in your own creative journey. And that's exactly what I've done.
Thank you very much for your inspiring and thought-provoking talk, Professor Crawford. It was a powerful reminder of the vital role of that creativity and the arts play in both our professional and personal lives. I really appreciated that you've shared invaluable repository of works from Arts for Health series to the Routledge Studies series, and I'm sure that your insights have sparked valuable reflection and dialogue. So I'm deeply grateful for your generosity and insight you've brought today. Thank you very much.
No